Hello and welcome to Go West. I'm Peter John Cohen.
And I am Maartje Jansen.
On Go West, a tour around northern Arizona to see Arizona's history through the way 4 of its towns developed. This region is known for its western look and feel, and the area consists of some beautiful towns which represents the history of the West. Their interesting stories from the past make them worth visiting.
Also, we'll see some of Arizona's most beautiful country. As we visit these historical cities, our tour guide Anke Vermeulen shows us the route we'll be taking today.
Thank you, Maartje. Today we'll visit 4 towns of northern Arizona. This part of the Grand Canyon state is famous for its Old West environment, natural beauty and its climate. We'll focus on 4 small towns. All of them played a different role in the history of this region and have a variety of stories to tell. Here's a quick overview of the route we'll be taking. Our journey starts at the old mining town of Jerome. Then we'll take a look at Clarkdale, a town named after the biggest investor in northern Arizona's history. Then we'll head southeast to the Verde Valley, where Camp Verde gives us an insight what happened between the white settlers and the Native Americans back in the late 19th century. Our final destination is the western tourist hotspot Sedona. Sedona has a lot to offer, starting with our famous red rocks and moving to the cowboy experience of a trail ride. But first we are going to dig deep into the mines of Jerome. This typical mining town from the past gives you a real feel for the Old West. Our reporter Robin Vos has the story.
We're standing here in the beautiful town Jerome, just 22 miles from Sedona. It's built high up on the side of Lingus Mountain and has some incredible views. Jerome is well known about its gold mine and its ghost town, but what a lot of people don't know is that it actually is famous because of its copper.
Mining operations began around 1910, and although the operation stopped in 1953, the local historical society has preserved a lot of the old mining sites. Mayor Jay Kinsella says mining equipment was quite complex.
Right now what I'm sitting under is the Audrey head frame. The uniqueness to this project and this park is the fact that this is the last wood head frame left in the state of Arizona.
These head frames were used to lift ore from mine shafts underneath.
The uniqueness about the shaft is this. It's actually 1,900 feet deep. 1,900 feet in realistic terms and things like that is 650 feet higher than the highest point in the Empire State Building. I don't have 20/20 vision, but if you have 20/20 vision, at the 1,500 foot mark you can actually see glitter marks and things like that, and that's actually a water level.
Another item in the park is the bullet, used to rescue people from the mines. But being towed up was far from pleasant.
You'd be freewheeling. You'd be bouncing into the walls and spinning around and things like that. The cool aspect of that is, if you look at that, that was designed in 1923. The Chilean miner rescue was last year. The design hasn't changed a bit. The other items that we brought out is a couple of different types of jackhammers. At the turn of the century, basically there was no electricity in Jerome. So bear in mind, as you were digging holes and things like that, you didn't have the opportunity to have air-driven this or that, but they continued mining.
The entire operation was huge. Jay shows us some proof in the historic archives.
These were the miners that used to go down and work the Audrey head frame. If you see in the photograph, the Audrey head frame is in the back corner, and this is one shift change. During a working day, 3 groups this size would go down in throughout the 24-hour period, and this was just one mining operation. We had several mining operations, so when you start looking at the amount of people here, they had wives, children, things like that. That explains how we got to the population of 15,000 people.
People who want to know more about the mining operations can visit the local mining museum.
So you could say Jerome's real beauty lies under the ground. But there's another invisible charm of this little western town. Ghosts. This town is haunted.
Jackie, owner of Go City Inn, has experienced it herself.
I did see the fella upstairs years ago when I was vacuuming in the middle of the afternoon. And I followed him because at that time we had shared bathrooms before we did renovating. And I followed him into a bathroom where he was standing in the doorway. When I got in there, he wasn't there. I mean, he was a foot and a half ahead of me and physically was present.
Jerome's wide variety of ghost stories may be doubted, but it sure is a major benefit to Jerome's tourism.
Now we have seen that Jerome really keeps surviving throughout the ages, from a multicultural mining town to a well-known tourist hotspot. For Go West, I am Robin Vos.
And when you're visiting Jerome, you might want to spend the night at the Ghost City Inn on Main Street or the Connor Hotel, just above the Spirit Room in downtown Jerome. And, of course, the Jerome Grand Hotel.
Next up, the town of Clarkdale. This town has a rich history based on one single man, William A. Clark. He invested a lot of money in local development, made possible by the mining activities in Jerome.
Also, Clarkdale is the place where you can find Tussey Good National Monument. Soraya Joosten tells us more.
Today we're visiting Clarkdale, your typical small town, but it has a big history. It's impossible to ignore the historic feeling Clarkdale gives you when you walk through. However, these buildings only go back in history a limited amount of time. To go to the real beginning, we have to visit this place, the Tussey Good National Monument. Park Ranger with Tussey Good, Mr. John Reed, says the Sinagua were the first habitants.
Tussey Good, or as it's pronounced in Apache, Tussey Hoot, is a pueblo. It is a village.
The Sinagua lived here from 1100 till 1400 AD, together with other tribes spread around the valley.
They were a farming culture. They farmed down in the valley and traded with one another, back and forth with other pueblos in the valley.
The Sinagua people had everything they needed in the valley, yet for some reason they left. Clarkdale Museum spokesperson Mr. Drake Meinke has an idea about what might have happened.
In the 1400s it was abandoned. Maybe there was a long drought or something in the area, we don't know. And then it was discovered again in the early 1900s, but Mr. Clark had bought up all the land around this region, and it was owned by Mr. Clark, Tussey Good.
So who was this Mr. Clark, and why did he buy this specific land?
Mr. Clark is the founder of the town of Clarkdale, and he came to Jerome and he saw the mine, and Mr. Clark already had a significant amount of money, and he could buy the mine outright. And he came here, he bought the mine, and within a few years, Mr. Clark built the railroad to come to Clarkdale, and then his mining operation grew, and the railroad started, and then they built the entire town of Clarkdale, Mr. Clark did, and they moved the smelter from Jerome to Clarkdale, also at the same time.
Of course, Mr. Clark didn't build all these things just for fun. No, even though he was extremely rich, he remained a smart businessman.
Clarkdale is an old copper mining town that was completely owned by Mr. Clark. Mr. Clark owned everything here. He owned the businesses on Main Street, he owned your home, he owned the furniture store, he owned the water in town, he owned the smelter. You worked for him, you bought from him, and you did everything with Mr. Clark.
The daughter of Mr. Clark, Miss Huguette Clark, became the subject of a TV series earlier this year. Caretakers at all three of her residences, located in Connecticut, California, and New York, declared they had not seen her in decades. Just last week, it was announced that Miss Clark had died on the 24th of May, 2011. She was 104 years old. Well, as you can see, Clarkdale is far more than an old mining town, and even though the Clark family is long gone, Mr. Clark's presence will still be felt. For Go West, I'm Soraya Joosten.
For more information about the Clarkdale Historical Society and Museum, go to clarkdaleheritage.org.
Now let's go to a historic army fort, Camp Verde. US Army soldiers were stationed at Fort Verde in the 1870s and 1880s to maintain peace between the white settlers and the Native Americans.
The town of Camp Verde originated because of the fort. Soldiers brought their families to the Verde Valley, so after a while a city grew up. Our man in the field is Gerben van der Zwaard.
We're here at Camp Verde, an old western town with a really nice fort. This fort used to be important for the relationship between the Native Americans and the white settlers. Fort Verde used to be a base for General Crook's US Army scouts and soldiers in the 1870s and 1880s. Tour guides Barbara and David Perriman are relatives of the first generation white settlers in the United States of America, and they can tell us more about the fort and its history.
There were forts built all over Arizona. How many, Barbara?
There were 43 forts that were established in Arizona to house the soldiers who were brought here to help keep peace between the ranchers and the Native Americans.
David and Barbara told us about US Army soldiers, Native Americans and white settlers. Camp Verde Historical Society's Vice President Ron Breton says these groups are important to Fort Verde.
The government in Washington had decided that the best way to handle the Indian problem was to gather all of them up and put them in one place. Well, what happened there then? Well, that opened up all this area here for white settlement. So by the time the Indians were turned loose to come back over here then, why, most of their land was gone.
So Camp Verde's Historical Society is all about the past, but it does keep an eye on the present.
It wasn't too awfully long ago that the tribe has established this casino up on top of the hill out there. And they have a lot more income coming in now than they used to have. Back then they were fighting against each other, and now they're working together, which I think is wonderful.
Since we have had one side of the story, let's move on to the other half. The Yavapai Apache Nation Indians. Let's have a word with Apache Mr. Randall.
We had a reservation that we signed for in 1871 that was 900 square miles, but that got taken away from us in 1875, and we were taken to a concentration camp.
Although the Native Americans were captured and deported, their new lifestyle has positive sides too.
My grandmother grew up in as a brush shelter, and I live in a 4-bedroom house. So the comforts of what the society brings is, some of it is good things.
Even though a lot of things happened in the past, both the white settlers and the Native Americans have to live together. Both sides are important to the other, but this doesn't mean they agree on each other's way of life. It remains to be a case of give and take. For Go West, I am Gerber van der Zwaard.
To get more information for your visit to Fort Verde, contact the Camp Verde Historical Society at 928-567-9560.
Today's final destination is the scenic town of Sedona, famous for its beautiful red rocks and its western atmosphere. Because of these distinctive rock formations, Sedona has been a setting for many western films.
Sedona's impressive views and its artistic beauty make it a popular destination for tourists in northern Arizona. Peter and our reporter Stephen Widers show us what Sedona has to offer.
We're standing here. Wow, that was really a great experience for me. And if you also want to go horseback riding, you should visit their website, sedonahorsebackrides.com.
This brings our journey to an end. If you want to have the real Arizona experience yourself, take time to visit some of these places around northern Arizona. And don't forget to have a chat with the locals. They can open doors for you.
Thanks for watching.
And don't forget,
Go West!